Thank you very much, and good morning to you and everyone who is joining us now in this partner session. Welcome to the DW Global Media Forum from my behalf too. My name is Javier Arguedas. I am a journalist and news anchor at the Latin America Programs Division of DW. But before that, I was also part of DW's distribution department. So I know how partnerships and friendships in the media sector are at the core of DW's strategy and about the way that we work. So I'm very glad to be hosting this panel today. As we already heard, it is about the challenges and the chances for media companies during and after the global corona crisis. And the reason why we wanted to host this panel together with treasured partners of DW is because we can all, of course, learn from our experiences as many countries are emerging from the pandemic and want to leave that chapter behind. It's important to talk about lessons learned. And in order to do that, I am very glad to introduce to you a panel of some of DW's treasured partners and friends from around the world. I'm going to start with Look Keng Tam. She is the CEO and board director at MediaCorp. That's Singapore's most important broadcaster, joining us from Singapore. Hello to you, Look Keng,
Hello,
and welcome.
Hi. Hello.
We also have
having...
Sergey. We're very glad to have you. Next is Sergey Medvedev. He is the CEO and co-founder of Dekabristen EV, which is an organization that, among many other tasks, helps and supports small media companies and media projects in Russian regions. Welcome to you too, Sergey.
Thank you for the invitation. Hello.
And Davit Böhm is the CEO and co-founder of Newsado, an innovative news platform. He is joining us from Linz in Austria. Welcome and good morning to you.
Hi.
So there's a lot, of course, to discuss, and maybe just to start, to give us an impression of where we stand right now, I'd like to start with you, Look Keng. As a CEO of a very important and big media company, you, of course, know exactly what the impact of the coronavirus crisis, but of all the other crises that have come with it, have actually had in the media sector. So where would you say do we stand now, and what's the biggest challenge that you have faced during the last 2 months or past year?
I suppose I would describe the past year. I think I would borrow from Dickens to say it's definitely the best of times and the worst of times. It was certainly challenging, and I'm sure the challenges were the same for many of us. In Singapore, we had a lockdown for 2 months last year, and certainly that created a lot of disruption to, the production, to the way that we're used to delivering our services. So that was certainly a challenge that we had to face. Certainly from an economic perspective, and commercially, we were also pretty challenged in that sense because, with a 2 months lockdown and no travel and some of the key sectors being impacted, certainly our revenues were impacted at the same. But I think for me, I've taken a lot of positives out of the past year as well, which explains why I think it's also the best of times. Because I think in rising to the challenges and in looking for opportunities to really break out of the problems that coronavirus brought to us, I think as an organization, we really pulled together. And I think we've also laid some very good foundations for new and innovative ideas to bring the business forward.
Speaking of innovative and new, Davit, you are considered a startup still, but you also have contact with lots of different media organizations because you work together with many different providers of content for your platform. So how did you see the coronavirus pandemic reflected in the work and in your own situation as a startup?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, the biggest problem was that all the conferences and meetings were cancelled. So for us, we planned booth at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, a trip to South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. We expected many personal meetings with publishers to talk about Newsado and partnerships. but then the whole industry was kind of paralyzed. It was very hard to arrange video calls for the first month of the pandemic with publishers. And I think the reason was that nobody had an idea how long this situation will last and how it will change the industry. And then some interesting things happened. So we saw that people looked for news in these days with an intensity like never before. So they wanted to be the first ones with information. The channels to get information haven't just been websites of the newspapers or TV channels. It was also social media, WhatsApp, and so on. But this information was fight, so nobody knows where this information is coming from. Many people tried to check this information on publisher websites. So what we learned is that there is a coexistency of traditional media and social media in this daily news consumption. And the users are consuming both, and they want to do that in the easiest way. And for us, that was a great learning to create new features within our system. We used this time, the last month, to implement new functions, combine content from social media and traditional media. Now we are, let's say, set up quite good for these next challenges coming.
That's a lesson learned, and I'm definitely going to ask you about that specific combination and that new functions just in a bit. But first, Sergey, I would also like to ask you, because you work together with journalists in regions that had, let's say, other problems despite and on top of the coronavirus pandemic. Just in general, from your point of view, did this pandemic bring journalism forward, or did it take it back? Because what we have seen is, on the one hand, a stronger consumption of media, but also many regions where the media was on fire.
First of all, I'm not sure that we are over with the pandemic. I think we are still in the middle of the pandemic, and it's hard now to speak about the consequences and all lessons learned. But true that for us, our organization, we work together with DW, but also with a lot of partners in Eastern Europe, in Russia, Belarus, and other countries. And normally we provide trainings, exchange programs, and other educational events offline. And for us, it was a beginning of the new era. It was a big challenge in the beginning. We, as Davit already said, we had to cancel a lot of conferences and seminars we planned in winter. We saw also one of the big challenges for the region, especially, and I think this is special for Eastern Europe or post-Soviet countries, that such countries as Russia and Belarus are isolated by a political situation, and the pandemic worsened this situation even. And on the other hand, we saw also opportunities, and the beginning of 2020 was kind of chaotic, and we had to learn a lot of new platforms and test other new instruments. But now we see that we're through digital platforms, through online events, we can reach journalists, media managers, young startups in the remote regions. And important lesson from 2020 was that people who were skeptical about online events saw that it works, and the acceptance of the online events and online meetups and conferences was quite high. I hope that we can take this lesson also after the pandemic and can combine it with the regular conferences and trainings offline.
Yes, we have made the same. We're just learned the same here at the Global Media Forum as well. This is a year where we're trying to do it a little bit of a hybrid, but we are all sure that the digital formats will definitely continue to exist. Now, speaking about partnerships specifically, DW carefully selects the partners that it works with in different parts of the world for many different reasons. We have talked about a credibility crisis in the media in the last few years in general, but especially during the pandemic. Many people were skeptical about what was especially in the mainstream media outlets. What was your experience as to the credibility? How could you sustain it during this time, and how are you sustaining it to this day? And maybe also, how does a partnership with other media companies help you out to build up on that credibility?
Right. We operate in 4 different languages in Singapore, covering every single community. Our flagship news product is in English, called CNA. CNA actually has we are actually Singapore's most trusted news brand, based on the Reuters Institute annual survey that is done. And I think that is really not something that, something that we have really built over the years. We've always maintained the importance of getting different points of view from various stakeholders across any piece of news that we do, and reporting as factually as reporting factually the news. So I think that trust is something that we've built over the years. So when it came to the pandemic, while there was certainly a lot of information and misinformation out there, we still found that credibility that we had built over the years had continued to had held up, I think, during the period. And in fact, we actually did see across, all our platforms, whether, as David said earlier, people were consuming more across everything, whether it was socials or whether it's the traditional broadcast platforms. And I think that credibility is something that you have to continue to build as a news or media organization every time, and challenge yourself to maintain, every day for every story that you report. And it's not something, so that when it comes to a crisis, it's not something that is as easily, I suppose, knocked down. Definitely partnerships are important, because especially in a time like this, where we're not able to travel, a lot of our news partnerships on ground made sure that we were also getting a broader coverage across the Asian region, which is our major focus, without us, without the ability to travel and be on the ground as well. So, that's definitely one of the partnerships. Outside of news, partnerships are also very important for us. All of us who are mainstream media brands are competing with a lot of the over-the-top services and big global budgets, and partnerships help us to pool our resources together and create better quality content that is a lot more competitive as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, on that note specifically about brands, Davit, you were already telling us that you saw basically a combination of the usage that people had from traditional media outlets and also social media. But how much does a brand weigh in your perspective, and from what you have observed, as to the trust that users actually have in the information they're receiving?
So I think that's very, very important. So we have to distinguish between 2 different types of articles. Articles with facts, so that should be checked, and articles with opinion. Both is fine, but you shouldn't mix it up. And for both, it's important to know where it is coming from. So who's the editor, what's the media brand behind, and then you can trust. You can trust and know that it's no fake news, because it's from this editor or media brand. I think in the last years, the main job of, for example, newspapers was to create and print the great newspapers, sell ads, and ship the newspaper to the readers. That was very cost intensive and a big barrier for new players. But now it's easy to create new online media brands and to publish just from a private notebook. So there are no barriers anymore, and there is coming fake news from. And the big asset of the big brands is trust. So if it's written by this or that brand, and you know that there are journalists who do the job in the right way, there should be the focus on. And I think brand journalism, that's what we need in a high quality standard for our in Europe, our mindset.
Now, you, of course, are trying to convince as many people as possible to select your platform as their main use of information, because it can personalize the experience to tailor to what the interest of a particular user is. Does it make a difference if you have more trusted brands, or is it more about the diversity and variety of sources that the person can get? How do you weigh those two?
It's absolutely the quality of the content and the trust in the media brands. So yes, we absolutely need these partnerships. We're having around about 150 partnerships up to now. Most of them we did before the pandemic. So the last year wasn't, I think, the time of new partnerships. It was not the year of change and speed within the industry, but maybe it's now the basis for speed and change in the next years. Especially for partnerships and collaboration. I think if we think about this branding and social media topic, I think we need to look what the users really want. So the biggest problem of the industry is that most of the publishers are focusing on themselves, create solutions, how they want the users to consume news, and that will definitely not work. So we need a solution where the user is in the focus to deliver the best possible news experience. And then there are many, many ways to monetize based on data, based on the spend time of the users, and to share these revenues within the industry. And I think this common solution together, based on great content, based on the media brands that you can trust, that's what the industry needs in the next years.
Now, Sergey, you yourself are a partner to media organizations, to smaller media companies, for example, and media projects, but you also have partnerships yourself. How does that contribute to protecting, for example, a journalist that is working in risky conditions or in complicated contexts that you also work with?
That's a very good question. Last year, we could do several events with the Russian associations for journalists, NGOs which defend rights of journalists, and this was a tough year, I would say, for the region. Not only because of the pandemic, as you in the beginning mentioned, and you all might know the situation with Navalny, their demonstrations in Belarus, and it was a big challenge for the journalists, and some of them were directly affected and put into prison and had to leave the country. Also, journalists of the DW were under arrest in Belarus too. So that's why we also focus on the risks for journalists in authoritarian regimes, and as I said, we could provide quality trainings for them, how to protect yourself, how to prepare for some trips to countries or to cities where the demonstrations take place, for example. And we could also develop cross-sectoral partnerships with associations, with NGOs, or with big companies like DW. And I think that's important to continue this work, to develop direct contacts. And this is unfortunately the big challenge with the online events, that usually you can provide knowledge, you can provide information, but you cannot provide this networking part where people exchange informally about their also very important topics and discuss new opportunities, new partnerships. And that's why I hope that we will start offline events and from the second part of 2021, and also will be able to invite our partners from, for example, Russia and Belarus to Germany, because they are, as I mentioned already, feeling themselves isolated and practically standing there alone with the regimes of Lukashenko and Putin. That's why we have to develop new formats and have to support them.
Certainly hope that it will be possible, because that networking part is essential. It was essential also for the Global Media Forum in past years, and we all hope that this is possible again. Now, maybe remembering that this is a crisis, not the only one that we will face. I would say that media in general tends to be rather resilient in crises, because people need information. It's maybe not comparable to other sectors that constantly get affected, for example, when the economy is bad or when there's political turmoil. However, looking again back and remembering what Sergey, of course, also reminded us of, that the pandemic is definitely not over. What lessons would you say, looking, maybe starting with you, do you have for preventing crises in the future? Something that you have learned from this difficult situation that we are facing right now?
I think as a media company, certainly what's been important to us and what has really allowed us to continue to keep that conversation and engagement with our consumers, whether it's in the past few years with so much upheaval in the industry and changes in audience behavior, is, I mean, for us, our fundamental is really to be audience centric, to really know and understand your audiences and to go where they are, and not just to try and fit your customers to the behavior that you want to see from them. It sounds simple enough. It's not so straightforward for businesses like ours. We've existed for 80 years since our first radio broadcast, and we've always been I would say a rather platform-based business. So you're really trying to get consumers to come to your store front. But I think in the past few years we have been very, very audience-based, and we've diversified the different ways of engaging with our consumers, whether it's extending to digital or social media platforms, striking new partnerships with, say, Google, with YouTube, for example, where they provide us with, native new. A different segment of customers, as well as global access as well. And I think really using our storytelling and adapting the storytelling to each one of the different platforms and to the different audiences that are there really has helped to, I think, helped us to continue to be an important brand, and a brand that is ubiquitous across all the platforms. And I think that goes a long way to ensuring the longevity of the business and the longevity of our relationship with our consumers, and regardless of whatever crisis or situation that we're in. From a partnership perspective, I think the other thing that we've learned is, we've been reminded of, certainly, is that we're all in the same boat together. We started the year from last year in a pretty worried about the commercial situation that we were all in. But I think one of the things that we pivoted very quickly to was really an outcomes-based or performance-based model with a lot of our key partners, because everyone was in the same uncertain boat. And I think when we did that, we were able to give our partners our commercial partners more of a risk-free environment. So if they succeed, we succeed as well. And I think that's done a lot to solidify the relationships that we have with these partners. And I suppose when you weather a storm together, you build a much stronger relationship for the future, and and potentially future crises as well.
So being user-centric is one of the most important aspects that you mentioned, Davit. I would like to ask you now about that function that you told us that you implemented, probably reacting to precisely that, the behavior that you saw with your users. Could you describe us briefly what that was about?
Yeah, so I think we learned that everything is about time and data within the industry to monetize the content. And if the people are spending time within Facebook and all these social media platforms consuming content from the publishers, that's quite bad because this time can be monetized. So what we need within the industry is a system working the other way around so that people can consume social media content within our system of the news industry. And that's the key to have the best news experience for the users in a common system of the industry, to keep them within the system as long as possible with great, helpful and entertaining functions. Yeah, and then to monetize this time based on data. So for the users, it's to get content from traditional media and from social media, extracting all the information out of it behind with natural language processing. So kind of artificial intelligence, and then we can match it in the right way and have great functions for the users to get all this data that is relevant for them and about the topics that they're really interested in.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sergey, as an organization, of course, your line of work is a bit different than a traditional media organization, if you will. But you also must have realized different things that could prevent, being shaken that much in a situation of crisis. What is your most important take so far about what you can do and what organizations can do that work with media?
Yeah, this uncertain situation from last year, this chaotic months in the spring and beginning of summer provided us opportunities, and we, as most of our partners, could learn new formats, new approaches, and could test them. And one of the great examples was our partnership with the DW with a number of trainings where we provided access to the DPA database and could educate young journalists also from remote areas and regions who could probably never participate in the regular events in Germany, providing access to independent texts, quality content from DPA, and they got free access to this database. So I think this was one of the best lessons we had, and we would like to combine, as I mentioned in the beginning, online activities, educational events with big meetups and gatherings, and I think global forum of the DW is a good example how it can work as a hybrid format and also offline next year.
We are definitely all learning and adapting to new realities that will certainly join us in the future. Our time is coming to an end, so I would like to draw some conclusions. I think the most important thing we can take away is that, first of all, friendships are resilient. Collaborations and cooperations in times of crisis can help to simply share, approach who we already know and trust in order to support each other. And I think the other very important thing is to listen to the users, something that media organizations in normal times often forget because of the stress of the day by day. So in that note, I would like to thank you also on behalf of DW's distribution department for your trust, for the work that we have done together and will continue to do together. And we certainly hope to see you in future events and also here at the Global Media Forum. Lok Keng Tam, Sergei Medvedev, and Davit Böhm, thank you very much to all three of you. And I'm going to now toss back for the rest of the program that the DW Global Media Forum has today back to Serta.